Let's get into this topic. So, emotional exhaustion, why you're not burnout, you're tired of pretending. I talk a lot about being authentic when it comes to dating, when it comes to just relationships, friendships, things like that. And it's extremely important because we talk about when liars lie, right? It's very hard to perpetuate that lie over and over again. We have to figure out then at that point if they're a liar, like I got to figure out what lie I told to what person, and it is exhausting, right? Being inauthentic is exactly the same thing. We are actually lying to people in order to gain their gain their friendship, whatever it may be. We are actually lying to them in order to do that, and we'll get into it a little bit. But a lot of time, it's betraying ourselves. It's betraying what we know, our truth, who we are, just to make sure that we maintain peace. And there's three different types of behaviors, so to speak, that go into this that create that emotional exhaustion, which again we'll get to here in a minute. But basically, it's like the people pleasing type stuff, the keeping the peace type people. Those people are not being authentic, and it ends up exhausting. We blame other people for it, right? And if you've watched my self-awareness one, we talk a lot about, when it comes to self-awareness, about taking accountability for where we're going wrong. We can't just blame the other people for just using us if we are offering ourselves up freely to be used, essentially. So when we start looking at these three behaviors that we're going to talk about here in a minute, we have to realize that we need to stop these behaviors. So I'm going to give you some good tools too at the end that are going to stop those behaviors, at least start to gain your self-worth back, gain yourself back in these situations, because this is a common problem among people these days. It's I don't even know where it comes from, in all honesty. I think maybe with the way social media has created comparison between people, we feel like we're going to lose people. The overabundance of options for friends and all that stuff allows us to try to hold on to people because we're afraid they're just going to go elsewhere. Maybe that's it. I'm not real sure. But these three behaviors are very, very common and very typical in what I see, right? So we want to figure out how we can be less exhausted, right? You're not exhausted because of you're doing too much. You're exhausted because you're being someone who you're not actually, you're acting essentially at that point, right? Burnout is often blamed on work or stress, but emotional exhaustion goes a lot deeper than that, right? It's not the amount of workload, it's the weight of pretending, essentially, is what I talk about, right? So, what is the cost of an inauthentic living, out there? Well, the first thing is when you say yes when you mean no. These are the signs of living out of alignment, right? When you say yes when you mean no. So if you say yes to something and then you're like, why did I say that? That's us living an inauthentic life. And then we have to start exploring what is behind it. What is the fear here? Are we going to be rejected? Are we going to be abandoned? What is the fear behind it? So when you say yes, when you mean no, okay? The next one is you shrink your needs to avoid being too much. If you ever walk into a room full of people and you're like, oh, I can't talk too much. I can't express my opinions because I'm afraid people are gonna be like, oh, she's just too extra. Or he's just too extra. That's telling you that you're either around the wrong people or you're trying to blend to fit in because you've got a fear of losing people in your life. Okay. The next one kind of goes to that too, where when you adjust your tone, your truth, or expression based on who's in the room. So if you know, like, oh my gosh, this person's in the room and I know I've got to change how I act around them because they're going to start calling me out or they're going to start being mean to me. If we have to change our tone, we are shrinking who we are to fit the situation. That is not, I mean, in some cases that may be okay to do, but if we're doing this every single time we walk in a room, we analyze who's there and we decide how we're going to act based on the tone of the room, that's not healthy. We are not living an authentic life at that point. And typically, this leads to the last sign that you're living out of alignment, which is you go on a social, a party, you go to a social gathering, something on the weekend, whatever, and you leave it feeling completely drained, even though nothing actually happened bad, even though there wasn't any drama or anything. We leave there feeling extremely drained. That's a sign that we're living out of alignment, right? So living inauthentically is like driving with your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. You go nowhere and you burn out faster, right? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, I am going to be something that I'm not while I want to be something else. That's the gas and the brake, right? I'm trying to be myself with the gas pedal, but the brake pedal is me trying to do all these things for another person, and it doesn't get us anywhere, right? The emotional mask that you wear at that point is going to cost you your energy. It's going to cost you connection. It's going to cost you self respect in a lot of cases. And it's going to cost you mental clarity. The self respect part is huge because without knowing it, humans are actually wired to understand respect, even if I can't put words to it, right? And if we see somebody that is disrespecting themselves towards us, a lot of times we will naturally want to take advantage of that. We will feel powerful. It's just human psychology. So we have to be careful about disrespecting ourselves because then we're going to be like, oh, they just use people. It's not about givers and takers and all that stuff. What it is that I am putting myself in situations where I'm having to give and I'm giving away my self-respect along with whatever effort I'm putting in. So we have to understand that saying yes when I mean no is a form of self-disrespect. And I can't expect other people to respect me if I don't first respect myself. Okay, so understanding these things and these behaviors will get you to take a pause before they happen so that way we can analyze what's going on and what is the most authentic way for me to show up in this situation. Now, at first, for a lot of us that have tried to fit into situations, into relationships, this can feel very, very awkward at first. We can feel very out of place. We feel guilty a lot of times for doing things, right? Or for saying certain things. And if we are feeling guilty for that, we have to ask ourselves, why is my opinion of something, a situation, whatever, causing me to feel guilty if I were to share that opinion? I believe what I believe for whatever reason, and I have the right to do that. So if I have to change my opinion based on something, that's not really being authentic. This happens a lot when you see groups of people and they'll be talking about something political a lot of times, and they're afraid to disagree with each other. If we're afraid to disagree, we have a fear of some sort, right? Disagreement should actually lead to betterment. In all honesty, we need to have disagreements as a culture in order to elevate where we go. If we didn't have any disagreement and everyone was agreeing, we would go in the wrong direction half the time. Somebody has got to question things, and we have to have that conflict to come to a third. Because if you have like two people, right, and one has this opinion and one has this opinion, and neither of them is 100% right and neither of them is 100% wrong, but there's a third option that comes out of those two opinions. When they're combined, we take parts of each of them and we come up with a third solution to a problem, which is actually better than either of the one other solutions that we had. The only way you're going to get there is through conflict. And a lot of people hate conflict to the point where they will be, I call it performative peace, right? I'm performing in such a way that's going to keep the peace because I'm afraid of that conflict. And that conflict isn't going to do anything because we're not going to come up to a solution that is beneficial to both people. So when I say agreeing to somebody, I'm saying like I agree to whatever they want to do, whatever their opinion is. It doesn't further the cause, so to speak. So what are the three behaviors that we see? And how do they affect that emotional exhaustion? Well, the first one is people pleasing. We all know this one, right? And people pleasing, and we'll talk about each one individually, but people pleasing comes from a place of fear. It always does. We have a fear of something behind it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The next one is perfectionism, meaning I feel like I have to be perfect or I'm not going to be accepted. I have to act perfect, or I have to, do things perfectly. I have to show up authentically perfect every single time in a way that they like. That perfectionism is another sign of a fear behind it, that if I don't do this, I don't amount to anything. And I can talk about where that comes from here in a minute. And the last one, like I said earlier, was the performative peace. Trying to keep the peace just because I feel like if the peace gets disrupted, I'm going to lose that person. Another fear behind that, right? These aren't just bad habits, okay? They're emotional disguise. Every one of them is rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being unworthy, or fear of conflict. Over time, they don't just hide who you are, they drain who you are, right? Because you have to actually work at who you are in front of other people because they don't come natural. When we are acting right, in a certain way, we are having to expend more energy than it would be if I were to be authentic and just tell people what I feel. And then on top of it, we have anxiety on top of it of trying to act that way. So it just compounds the problem. When I'm authentic, if people walk out of my life, yeah, it hurts, but in all honesty, I don't have to sit there and play a game with this group of people that now I got to play a different game with this group of people, and then I have to play a different group of with this people over here. By doing that, I'm having to figure out how to shift gears constantly based on who I'm talking to. And it can be exhausting remembering how I'm supposed to act in different people because of the way they act, what they like, right? And that's where that performative piece comes in. So the first one, the people pleaser, right? If they're happy, I'm safe is kind of like the core belief behind it, right? Is that if they're happy, then I don't have to worry about them coming at me for anything, right? Or being upset with me. And really what this comes down to is a core fear of rejection or disapproval, right? They don't like certain things. It starts early, right, in life when environments where love or stability was conditional. This is where this comes from. Like we have to act a certain way. We have to provide and soothe their needs in order for them to not come at us. And a lot of times that happens very early on in childhood is that we feel like we have to do things for our parents in order to obtain love, right? We won't be able to obtain their love if I don't perform on a certain level, right? The perfectionist kind of comes from the same one. It just kind of drives in a different direction. But the people pleaser and the perfectionist are very, very similar, right? And a lot in both of those two. Imagine a child that comes home and they did the absolute best that they could on a test and they got a C, right? And the parent looks at that child as if they are nothing because they didn't get an A. Even if that parent thinks that that child should have gotten an A, they could have applied themselves better, they're still shaming that child into now thinking that they have to perform in order to get love, right? We can tell somebody that they need to do better without removing the love, but a lot of parents don't know how to do that. And we end up with children that go through the world thinking I have to perform at a certain level, right, in order to get love. And it can develop both ways. It can go into the people pleasing behavior. Well, I have to do exactly what they want, not necessarily what I want. And I have to, be perfect at whatever I'm doing, right? For example, like a parent that thinks his child should be a doctor, right? If we end up, going to school and doing that doctor degree just because my parents said so, I am people pleasing. And that's a lot of times where parents go wrong is they try to force their kids, like, you're so smart, you should do this. And we use the disguise of, well, we're trying to push them to go further. And that's fine, but that's not pushing your child. That is actually creating something horrible inside of them, which now they think they have to people please in order to gain love from people. Okay? So it's a delicate balance of teaching a child and letting them do their own thing and learn who they are and putting that little bit of pressure on them, okay? We've got to be kind of balanced in how we do that. So it starts early, like I said, with love or stability feeling conditional. The pattern is you learn to scan the room for needs that aren't yours and then call it kindness, right? And typically these are the people, like, let's say you're in a group setting, you're at somebody's house. You're typically the person in a people pleasing thing, like, oh, let me get your plate for you. Oh, I see you're almost empty on a drink. Would you like another one? And it's not even your house, and you're sitting there trying to make sure that they're comfortable. You're getting up from the seat to give somebody else the comfortable seat. You're making sure that everybody else is being engaged. You're trying to engage everybody all at the same time. Those people that do those kinds of things are considered people pleasers, right? Some other examples of this, you're going to agree with opinions you don't hold. A lot of times when we are in situations where political stuff comes up, a lot of times we're going to agree with somebody in the room just because I don't want to disagree and end up going down the conflict route. So I'm going to people please. I'm going to make them, not only am I going to agree with their opinion, a lot of times I'll stroke their ego if I'm in that position, right? Oh, you're so right. Even though in the back of my head I'm saying you're so wrong, I'm going to say that in the moment to try to gain their affection, so to speak. They like being agreed with, so then they like turn around and they give me some form of attention, right? And again, if we look at people pleasing from that angle of I'm trying to make them like me and make them happy so that way they turn around and give me attention of some sort, that is considered a form of manipulation. I'm trying to please them in such a manner that they turn around and they love me back. That is a form of manipulation. And when we start looking at some of these behaviors from that perspective, I swear it makes me feel disgusted in how I've acted in the past and that I'm actually trying to control people into loving me. And that's where being inauthentic, that's what gets you exhausted. Then you try to blame everybody else. They're just not a good person. No, they're just not a good fit for you. Their values might not be the same. They may not like the same things, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to love you for who you are, right? And that's where the being authentic gets us completely upside down in these relationships. And it's not just romantic relationships. This happens in friendships too. We always have that one friend that's willing to do anything at any time for anybody, and that people pleaser is exhausting themselves over time, right? And again, we call it kindness. It's not kindness to do everything for somebody, because a lot of times what we're doing is we're enabling them to keep going down a bad path by doing that, right? Another good way of this coming out is you're offering to help, offering help you don't have time or energy to give, right? If somebody's coming at you like, hey man, can you help me on Saturday? And you got a work shift, you know what I mean? And you'll be, oh, well, I gotta cancel work just so I can go do this. And that's not a healthy thing to do, right? That's considered people pleasing. When we change our plans to fit somebody else's, when we know that whatever it was we had to do at that same time was actually more important, but we're so afraid of losing that person that we think that if we tell them no, that they're going to leave us, right? There's that fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, disapproval that we're talking about, okay? And the last one is anytime you feel guilty for saying no. So if you have said no, right, and you're like, oh, I should not have said no. I know I don't want to do it, but I should not have done that to that person, right? We are now people pleasing. We're feeling guilty for something we should not feel guilty for. And that is considered a form of people pleasing. That's telling us that even though I wasn't pleasing that person, I suffer from it because I'm feeling guilty about something that I should not feel guilty for, right? And this is why I always say when you're a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser like I have been in the past, we have to ask ourselves a 3-question series before I start any request from somebody. Do I have the time? Do I have the mental space? And do I have the ability or the am I the best person for the job kind of thing, right? Because if somebody were to ask me, hey, can you drive me here? And I don't have a driver's license, I'm not really qualified to do what they need me to do. So it's the time, the mental capacity, and the ability to be able to help that person. You can't come to me and ask to do brain surgery. You see what I'm saying? And it's crazy because we think in terms of that, like, oh, if somebody asked me for brain surgery, I'd say no because I don't have the ability. But when it's something that stretches us a little bit and is just a little bit outside of our confines, we may not be the best person for the job. They ask us, we want to jump at that chance. We wouldn't do it if it was something like brain surgery, so we should not do it if we don't have the ability or capability, so to speak, to do that job. So again, time, mental capacity, and a capability or ability to do the job. If we don't have one of those 3, just one of them, I should not be saying yes to that request, right? And we'll give you some tools on how to word that when you want to talk to those people, because a lot of people, the reason why they can't say no is not because they don't want to. A lot of people are like, well, I just don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say it without being mean. I don't know how to say it without a tone. I don't know how to say it. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? But that's people pleasing at its core. Okay. The next behavior is the perfectionist, right? If I do everything right, I won't be rejected. And again, just like we talked about with children, this happens when we think that we have to perform in a certain way. So like the kid that misses a play at second base, and the dad's like taking this child to the side and picking him apart and be like, oh, you're nothing. You need to do twice as much work and you don't amount to anything because he missed that one thing. Right? He had an error at second base. You know what I mean? And that right there teaches the child that they need to perform at a perfect level. Otherwise, they're not good enough. Right? And that's, again, the danger of forcing children into sports and trying to, shame them when they don't play good enough in your eyes. Even though sports should be how to become more social, it should be how to be part of a team. It should be learning skills and learning to see how you develop and grow. It should not be about perfection for their age level. It should not be about you need to do this so you can get to the next level. When we get in that mentality, we are actually driving in mental defects into that child. And we wonder why we're having problems as a society. Now, granted, to get into baseball is much more competitive than it was, or basketball or softball or, whatever sport you're into. But in the 50s and 60s, we did not have people playing sports 24/7, 365, trying to get their kids into things. That makes this perfection mentality. This makes performance-based love. right? And that's what's teaching these children that. And then we wonder why these children get out of sports when they don't make it to college, sports wise. Then they end up in relationships and they equate the same things that their parents were doing to them in sports, pushing them and trying to be perfect. They equate that into the relationship. So we have to understand that we've got to be very, very careful with children to not push them too hard into these things. Okay. But the perfectionist, right? The core fear behind it is not being enough, right? And how that starts is conditional praise or fear based correction, right? So the conditional praise is like only if you get an A, only if you have a game where you hit, 3 for 3, or you hit only when there were people in scoring position, you got to hit on those hits, right? Like those little things right there make it performance based, and we think that we have to be perfect, otherwise we don't get love, right? And it's even as crazy to sound is like taking a team to Dairy Queen only if they win. I know in our minds as adults, it is a reward, but in the child's mind, they are equating you don't love them if you don't do that. And I know that sounds crazy, but over time, if you continue to do that, you're beating into that child's head that they have to perform at a certain level, otherwise they do not get love. And we're all worried about where the world's going these days. And we're all talking about how, oh man, the dating pool is this, and people are like this, and nobody has respect. But they don't want to look at how we're continuing to treat children in ways that are creating these monsters later, so to speak, as far as how people act. So if we want to get better, we have to start with the generations behind us and start teaching children that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not be perfect. I still love you, but let's try harder next time. But we don't know those phrases. We don't understand how to connect to our own children, and that's where we have problems because it creates this perfectionist, right? So the pattern is you equate worth with performance and flawlessness. We have to be perfect, otherwise we're not going to get love. And again, if we see how that develops, if you were to look at people that think they are perfectionists and you go back to their childhood, you'd see every single time where their parents beat this into them, right? And so we've got to get past it at the child level. We have to start treating our children with a little bit more dignity and respect, pushing them, yes, but doing it in a loving manner, okay? So some examples of how this kind of comes out, right? Like you'll rewrite an email 5 different times, right, before you send it. Like you'll read it and go, oh, that's not good enough. I got to reword that. And you reword it again and again and again and again. Or text messages too. You'll reword a text message 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times before you send it. Like, and you're like, oh, and each time you finish it and you reread it, you're like, oh, that's just not good enough. That's that perfectionist mentality coming out, right? When you over prepare to avoid criticism, right? When you feel like you've got to continually work on a project, you're like, it just has to be perfect. You're not allowed to have anything that's off place. When you continue to be that level of perfectionism, you are, you're literally driving yourself wild and kind of going crazy because you're trying to do too much for the people around you. Okay. Another example is when you feel crushed by imperfection, right? When, especially if it's something that other people notice, but more so, honestly, when you notice your own imperfections. So I built this bookcase that's behind me. You guys see it every single Sunday. I've got it behind me in the live. I built the whole thing, right? And there are places where I can see imperfections, and I'm okay with that. I did the absolute best that I could. Most people walking in here, not a single one of them will see those imperfections. Now, as a perfectionist, if I was one, I would be looking like, I can't. I would almost have this OCD kind of mentality of I can't let it sit unless it's perfect, right? So I feel crushed like I'm nothing because I couldn't get the paint just right and the line isn't completely straight. Like those kinds of things are perfectionism. Again, that's speaking to the way you were brought up is that if I don't do perfect, I'm not going to receive love. Okay. Now the last one is what I consider the most dangerous one, the peacekeeper. If I avoid conflict, I stay connected, and this is where the phrase that I use a lot is that there's a difference between a nice person and a kind person. And we are overly nice when we avoid conflict a lot of times. And by doing so, I actually can enable a lot of bad behaviors because I'm afraid of conflict, because I'm afraid of speaking my mind, because we'll allow someone to literally physically abuse us without saying anything because we want to keep the peace. And that is not a healthy way to be, right? And the core fear behind it is abandonment through confrontation, right? They're afraid of like the blow up fight that causes like a breakup. right? They fear a blow up fight that you lose somebody as a friend over, right? And that may be where it comes from. The peacekeeper a lot of times usually had one of two things. They usually had some sort of relationship end very early on, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship very early on in life, where somebody stormed out all angry and it was somebody that was very, very important to them, and it hurt them to the point where now it's very hard for them to understand that you don't have to keep the peace in order to keep people. You have to just realize that people are going to leave no matter what anyways, right? Or this peacekeeper, if I avoid conflict, had a parent that was all over the place, and that like they would give the child some sort of punishment, right, if they didn't do what they were told, if there was confrontation, and they abandoned, like they withheld love, and a lot of times this happens in abusive friendship or abusive parental relationships, where there's substance abuse, things like that, where they literally the parent acts like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? Where when they're not drinking, they're the nice person, and then they start drinking and they end up like mean and nasty. So the person literally has to rely on trying to keep the peace in that parental relationship, so they don't get abused, they don't get yelled at, things like that. That's where that kind of develops, right? So that's how it starts: explosive or unresolved conflict. And the pattern is you silence your need to keep others calm. Like, even though somebody is hurting you with the way they're treating you, you will keep calm, and you're like, nope, I'm not going to say anything because it's not worth it, because I might lose this connection out of it. Okay, some examples of this, right, is and this, I tell you, this is insidious. It really is. And you do this thing where you laugh off hurtful comments, right? And you'll even accept them, like if you were to even think about saying anything like, if you don't, laugh, and they like, I'm just joking, like, I know. When in all honesty, your body is screaming, say something. Like, that was not a very nice comment, and I don't appreciate that. But we don't know how to say that, so we just kind of suck it up and we laugh it off, right? If we avoid hard conversations, meaning like, I know that I should tell this person they're doing something wrong, but I'm like, nah, if I say something though, it's going to get them to exit my life. If I say something, we might end up in a big fight. If that's your reasoning behind not actually having a hard conversation, then we need to start looking at, why are you in a relationship to begin with? Because a relationship should be safe enough to say things both directions without that fear of going somewhere. And if we've built a relationship in the proper manner of slowly attaching, slowly giving trust to somebody, then we should be in a place where we are emotionally safe enough to open up about whatever it is without the fear of that person going somewhere. If you do not have that safety, especially if you're like 6 months to a year into a relationship, we need to reevaluate that relationship, because you haven't built true trust. What you have built is just a pattern of behavior that's like, I think I know how they're going to act, right? And a pattern of behavior does not equal trust. We have to have trust that pattern of behavior shows that they respect us. That's why I go back to that whole, I cannot have trust without respect. I can trust in their behavior, but not trust in them. Meaning, I know how they're going to act in different situations, but that doesn't mean that how they're going to act is a healthy way. And that's where a lot of these people pleasing, peacekeeper type things come out of, is that I know what their behavior is going to be, so I can trust myself to recognize the pattern. But then what they're doing is not healthy, so I have to use one of these three things to mitigate their bad behavior. That's not trust, right? Because there is no respect. If they respect you, they're not going to do those things that are going to put you in those positions, right? So it's very, very important to understand that if we avoid hard conversations, we need to reevaluate the relationship we're in, because it's more than likely not a healthy relationship. Or we may not have just opened up the way we should have. We didn't attach the way we should have. We should be working on trust on a different level than what we are. Okay. It may not be that they may actually respect us, but we haven't spoken up to understand. And if you want to build trust, you have to have the hard conversation to see that that person's not going to run. We can't just avoid the hard conversation to begin with and say, well, they might run. Well, then you're never going to build trust, because you have to put yourself out there in a vulnerable manner. Have a hard conversation. That's why I say very early on in dating, we need to open up in a vulnerable way in small doses. Like, imagine walking up to a pool and you put your toe in, right? Putting your toe in is kind of like testing the water. Well, when it comes to trust, we have to do the same thing. We have to afford them an opportunity to show that they are going to respect us and that we can trust them. So we have to open up about some things vulnerability wise, so that way they will then show respect to us for our side of things and show that they're not going anywhere. And we do that slowly over time, and that builds actual trust with somebody. But I can't say that, oh, well, just this amount of time has passed that I can trust them. It needs to be, we have to give them things to trust. We have to give them boundaries. We have to tell them what our needs are. We have to tell them what our wants are. See if they respect those, and then put those in a position to where they want to help us with those needs and wants and boundaries. And then we can see if they respect us. Over time, that's what builds trust. Right? So avoiding hard conversations is not a very healthy thing. We need to reanalyze that relationship. Right? The last one with the peacekeeper, saying fine when you're not. Right? And I'll say that women, you do this way more than men, in the sense of saying you're fine, like, and totally meaning you're not. And men can read right through that one. Be like, I'm fine. Every man that I know knows that when a woman says she's fine, she's not actually fine. And then at that point, when you realize that you're mad at your man for lying to you, and you have now, he asks you if you're okay, and you say, I'm fine, and you're not, you are now a liar, just the same as you hate in him. So please do not say you're fine in a relationship if you are not fine. Don't say, I'm okay, if you're not okay. If there's a problem, that means that you're now lying to them, and you're putting it on them to try to figure out what's going on, and that's not fair to them. Okay. Again, happens way more often than you would expect. Women are very, very good at that. Now, men, we won't say either way whether we're fine or not. And we won't say I'm fine a lot of times. We'll say I just don't feel like talking about it. But that's the three different behaviors, right? The people pleaser, the perfectionist, and the peacekeeper, right? So what is the nervous system's role? You guys know I talk about the nervous system a ton when it comes to emotional regulation, and even my book, Trigger Control, which I got a copy sitting right here. If you haven't ordered it. But in that book, we talk about nervous system regulation, because we've got to regulate our nervous system in order to stay calm, so that way the messages that our nervous system is giving our body do not go straight to the amygdala and stay there. They go from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, so our brain can think logically. So what is the nervous system's role in that emotional exhaustion, right? Your nervous system, first off, was designed to protect you. It's not there to keep you happy. And that's the problem, is that when we sense danger, and we have to understand that the body does not understand the difference between a bullet and a betrayal. A lion charging at you and someone being mean with their words. Your body cannot tell the difference. So our nervous system is going to get activated as if there is a threat. Understanding how to control our nervous system out of that is going to be extremely critical. So if we look at the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, right? I always talk about fight or flight because those are the typical two that we talk about the most. But there's fawn and freeze too, right? There's those four. So those are the survival strategies that the body has, right? Think about it like this. Like with certain animals out there in the wild, freezing is a better idea, right? In certain cases, fighting that animal is a better idea. In some cases, running from that animal is a better idea, right? In some cases, just showing you're not dominant and fawning is a better option. So how do those kind of come out when it comes to people, right? If you are a people pleaser, you are fawning, right? You are being agreeable. That's what fawning really means, is that you're nuzzling up to that person, trying to warm them up by doing what they want. So you fawn by people pleasing. You freeze by disconnecting from your needs, right? So if you know you need something and you like, I don't want to say anything, that's freezing. Okay. You fight by controlling or perfecting. So when we talk about controlling or perfecting, that really can be the people pleasing as well, in that I'm trying to control them into loving me. And doing the same thing when we're talking about perfecting, is I'm trying to control the situation by perfecting everything in it so that that person is going to love me. Okay. That's a fight response. Now, the flee response is like when you avoid a hard conversation, you ghost people, you self-isolate. All of those are signs of chronic fatigue. Chronic activation of the nervous system equals chronic fatigue. So we've got to learn how to really calm the nervous system down. And I mean, we'll probably do another live on the nervous system specifically in the future. But yeah, we need to learn how to control our nervous system so that way it doesn't go into that like that system doesn't stay broken, so to speak, in the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze stage. We have got to learn how to bring ourselves out of it. Resilience, when we talk about emotional healing, resilience isn't about avoiding the hard things. It's about realizing the hard things are going to come, but I'm better at repelling them and recovering afterwards. I know now that heartbreak is going to happen, but I recover from it much, much differently now than I did, say, 5, 10 years ago. 5, 10 years ago, a breakup of, with a girlfriend for, say, a year, right? A breakup with a girlfriend after a year would create a year's worth of time for me to heal. Now it creates a lot less time, unless it's abusive. I get it. But it creates a lot less time for me because I'm resilient to it and I've learned how to regulate my nervous system and how to regulate my own emotions. Okay. So understanding that, understanding I've got to regulate my nervous system, that's where the part of the key is, right? And so we go back to breath and we say, okay, in any situation when we get this, right, we've got to start breathing and we got to start grounding ourselves in order to make sure that I can respond and not react to the situation, right? So the next section of this here is authenticity isn't exhausting. Pretending is, right? When we think about how I have to act a different way under different groups of people, that means I have to shift gears. And this is where, like, a lot of times, like, oh, I've got to go out with these people and they're going to expect me to be super talkative, right? That's people pleasing. If you're going out with friends and you're dreading it because you're like, oh man, they're going to ask all these questions, you are people pleasing by going out with them at that point. You don't have the time, mental space, or the capability, right? And so when we think of those kinds of things, that's what I'm talking about. When we go into a situation like that where I have to do something that I normally is not who I am, then that's creating an inauthentic situation, which then is exhausting me because I'm pretending to be something that I am not in that moment, which is extremely harsh for me. All right. Being genuine restores your energy because it aligns with your inner truth and with your outer behavior, right? When our outer behavior and our inner truth do not match, that's where we get exhausted, right? So benefits of being authentic, right? You're going to second guess yourself less, right? You're going to have quicker recovery from stress, like we just talked about with resilience, right? If I'm being authentic and I know that a relationship ended and it ended for the right reasons, and I'm being true to myself and walking away from that relationship, then I have an easier time, building up some resilience to that stress, right? For the stress of heartbreak, because I know this person is not aligned with me. But when I extend myself into them, people please, and do all this stuff, I'm not going to have that recovery because I've extended myself. I'm like, I did all these things for them. Why aren't they loving me? Right? I'm using the people pleasing, the perfectionism, or the peacekeeping in order to try to get them to love me. That's exhausting because now I've got to recover from that. Like, why would they not love me when I did all this extra stuff? Just be you. And if they love you for that, great. If they don't, it's not as hard to come back from because you didn't overextend with energy into that relationship, right? It's going to give you easier communication. I know it sounds backwards, but when I give you these tools, we can have a much better time trying to articulate who we are to somebody when I'm being authentic. Like, there's no need to try to, okay, well, I've got to say it like this because they're going to get mad if I say it like that, right? And a lot of times when you think about this, the reason why, like, if we are authentically who we are, the relationships we're going to have around us are going to be mirrors to us. They always are, no matter what. The relationships of the people around us are mirrors for us, meaning they're acting similar to us. So when I end up doing that and I start being authentic, I'm going to attract people that like that energy that I bring. By keeping those people around, they're going to re-energize me. But by being inauthentic and being in places I'm not supposed to be, I'm actually expending energy when they're not giving me any back, right? Because they are not like me. They are not the same person as me. They're nowhere, they don't relate to me on any level, and a lot of times. And that's why I have to be inauthentic around them, is because if I was my authentic self, I'll probably lose them. Well, that means I'm staying in relationships that aren't designed for me, all out of a fear of being alone in a way. So being authentic, I don't have to expend as much energy because the people around me are mirroring and they're going to give back to me in the same respect that I'm giving them. Okay. So relationships are going to be a reflection of who you are, not who you perform to be when you're authentic. Okay. Again, performances are exhausting, 100%, right? Being authentic is like taking off a heavy costume you've worn for years. You may feel exposed at first, but you can finally breathe. Imagine like if you wore one of those like crazy the mascots, right? Like let's say a baseball game, one of the mascots that does all the running around and all that stuff. That thing gets hot, it gets sweaty, it's nasty, you can barely see, right? You're taking and it's heavy, right? So you get exhausted. You take that costume off, and you may feel like a cold rush of air at first, but over time that's going to feel exhilarating because you're like, okay, I don't have to act anymore. I don't have to do things in a specific way because people expect things from me, right? We can be who we are. And the great part is that if we're authentic over time, people don't expect certain things that we are now while we're people pleasing, we're expecting of ourselves. We're expecting ourselves to say yes to all these things. When we are authentic, people don't expect that from us, and we can feel a little bit more ease because we're not having to be the person that everybody depends on. Because in all honesty, people are like, oh, I am the person that everybody depends on. You are, because you're choosing it. You're not, and that's not a healthy behavior. To say that, to write a meme and throw it online, says I'm the person that everybody leans on. That's not a flex. That's not a flex, because I guarantee you're the person that's crumbling, right? So instead of being the person everybody leans on, be the person that respects other people and allows them to respect you by setting boundaries, by saying that's too much for me. Right? Because you're crying for help that you're a strong person. You shouldn't do that. That doesn't mean that you're strong. It means you're weak enough that when you do that for people over and over again, it's crushing you. And so you have to reach out to people to tell people you're the strong person. Probably not a good thing. Okay? So it's not a flex to say you're the strong one. It's a flex to say I set boundaries and I respect myself enough to say I can say no to things without a reason why. I don't have to say no because blah, 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 blah. I can say, nope, that I cannot help you with that. Right. And if they ask you, be like, well, I just, it's not your business to know why I can't do it. Just know I can't. If I could, I would, but I can't. Right. So what are some tools that we can use to reclaim authentic energy? Right. We talk about reaction versus response when it comes to nervous system. We always talk about that sacred pause, right? The take a deep breath. What are we doing during that breath, though, that before we respond to something that we need to be doing? Well, the first thing is we're going to ask ourselves a question, right? And somebody asks you to do something, or somebody asks you your opinion on something. Take a deep breath in, and while that breath is going in, we're going to say, am I being honest, or am I doing this to be liked? Right? Am I being honest, or am I doing this to be liked, or am I saying this to be liked? Right? Somebody asks you, what's your stance on abortion? And you know that they are a pro-life person. Be like, okay, am I telling them I'm pro-life because I'm being honest, or am I telling them I'm pro-life so that they like me? Like, which one is it? And when I take that breath and I do that question, right, this self-check reveals whether your behavior is aligned with your values or your fears. If we sit there and we say, okay, well, I'm saying this because I want them to like me, then we have a problem, because now we're aligning with our fear. We're not aligning with our value. Our value may be, no, I'm pro-choice, and you can have a very good reason for both sides of pro-choice or pro-life. There are great arguments on both sides of it, right? And if you fear telling your side of why, you're giving into the fear, and you're doing it to be liked at that point. So how do we use it? Next time you agree to something, pause before responding, right? Ask yourself, would I still say yes to this, even if I didn't fear disapproval? Or you could word it like, am I saying yes to this because I fear that they're going to be mad at me over this? If that's the case, you're not doing it from authentic energy. You have to then ask yourself, do I have the time, the space, the capacity to do this, the capability to do this? And if you do, you say yes. So if you're saying, I'm saying yes because I fear disapproval, we're in the wrong space, right? Again, so you've got to give yourself permission to renegotiate or decline, right? Renegotiating meaning like if somebody asks you, hey, can you help me move on Saturday at 4:00, right? And you take a deep breath and you say time, space, and capability. I have the capability of being there, right? I don't have the time because at 4:00 I got to do this, and I do have the mental capacity for it. Then we can renegotiate in this case. And a lot of times people forget about the renegotiation, right? We just have to we think we have to say yes to their request or no to their request. There can be renegotiating, like, man, I'd love to help, but I've got, this event at 4:00. Can we move that to the next day so that way I have enough time for you? I mean, if that's not going to work, you're going to have to find somebody else, because I got something going on, but I'd love to be there.
That can help us get rid of some of that guilt. And when we're saying, like, I'd love to, I just can't at that time. So again, if I've asked myself the question, do I have the time? Do I have the mental capacity? And do I have the capability? And then I can renegotiate with that person. And then if it's something that I just cannot do because of one of those three and there's no way around that, then I can decline it. And I can have a lot less guilt because I've gone through the process of saying I'm not capable of doing this at the time that you're requesting. Okay? So, some real life practice, if you're invited to a social event and you feel pressure to go, ask, do I genuinely want to go, or am I afraid of what they'll think of me if I don't? Or I can say, do I genuinely want to go, or do I have a fear of missing out on something while I'm there? Right? Again, when we ask ourselves that question, it may sound stupid to ask yourself these questions, but I can promise you that when you do that, you're actually going to find answers. Like, it's really, really surprising when you actually ask yourself these questions, right? So this is where we move into the speaking in micro truths, right? You don't need to become radically vulnerable overnight. You don't got to start. You start by telling tiny truths that keep you in alignment with yourself. That means that I always say, if don't say 10 words if 5 words will do, right? So instead of saying, like, it's fine, say, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. When someone's like, like, are you mad at me? Instead of saying it's fine, micro truth, micro truth. We don't have to tell them everything. We don't have to tell them why we're mad. When you say, I'm just not ready to talk about it yet, that signals to them that we're being honest, that there's something bothering you, but you're just not ready to talk about it. And then they can show respect to you, and we can trust them from that point forward if they do respect that space and that boundary that you're now setting. Okay, so taking the words, it's fine, and turning it into, I'm not ready to talk about it yet. And then you can even be curious about it, because I always say curiosity is always good. Say, can we pause for a little bit, and can we revisit this question later? That's showing that you respect them too at that point, because it's not just about them respecting you. You have to show respect back. So if they say, hey, can we talk about what's bothering you, and you say, I'm just not ready to talk about it yet. Can we revisit this tomorrow? That's they showing you respect and you showing respect right back. Okay. Another phrase that we can use, instead of pretending to agree, say, I see it differently, meaning pretending to agree with somebody's opinion, right? Someone's like, oh my gosh, pro-life and this, and they state their side and be like, instead of being like, yeah, I know, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, me too. Don't say it like that. Say, I just see it differently. We don't have to tell them everything. We don't have to go into all the details of how I see it differently. Just say, I see it differently. And if they want to know more, then maybe we can decide to. Or we can, again, if like, what do you mean you see differently? Like, I'm just not ready to talk about it yet. Right? We can set that boundary that says, please respect the fact that I don't feel like talking about it, but I at least want to let you know that there is disagreement here. Right. And this is the toe touching, like testing the water to see if they respect us, to see if they're worthy of being in our life. We'll never know that if we never say things along these lines. Right. Instead of ghosting someone, what we can do is say, I need some space. I'll check in tomorrow. I always talk about timed boundaries, right? To not ghost somebody completely when there's disagreement or conflict, or they want you to agree to something, or whatever the case may be. Saying I need space is okay, but when we take space and we prolong it for such a period that we're actually causing them to overthink, that's not very fair to them. So we give a timed boundary of saying, okay, can we talk about this tomorrow evening? I know right now is not a good time. I'm just not ready to talk about it. Can we talk about it tomorrow evening instead of that ghosting effect, right? So the 3 ways to use these micro truths, again, are instead of saying it's fine, say I'm not ready to talk about it yet. Instead of pretending to agree to somebody's opinion of something, say, I see it differently. Instead of ghosting, say, I need some space. I'll check in tomorrow. I'll check in at 5 tomorrow evening, whatever the case may be. These micro truths are going to start aligning with yourself, and you may feel guilty at first for saying some of these things, but overall, when you walk away from that situation, you'll at least feel better and more confident that you stood up for your boundaries, so to speak. It's not a full-on assault on them by saying any of these things. We're not even bringing up any conflict. We're just telling them that we need something out of this, and we're not being 100% honest and transparent, but we're not ready to be yet, and that's okay. These micro truths are going to slowly bring us into a place where we're a little more comfortable speaking up, because if we're doing this with people that we have in our life currently, And let's say the first time I say, I'm not ready to talk about it yet, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to push. Now I'm like, okay, well, they respect me. They respect this boundary. So the next time I have to speak up, they might respect me a little bit more. So I can use a little bit more vulnerable tone. Like, I'm not ready to talk about it yet because I'm actually pretty upset about it. Right? That's adding to that micro truth that we started with, that the next time I can open up a little bit more without fear of them running anywhere. Because of how I handled this, I'm not fearing that they're running. They're not going to fear I'm running because I'm opening up slowly in a more vulnerable way each time, a little bit at a time. These micro truths start to grow into larger truth until before you know it, you're having full on conversations. Instead of saying, I'm not ready to talk about it yet, you can say, give me a few minutes to kind of collect my thoughts and then we'll reattack this real quick. But I want to really take in what you have to say. And then like within 3 or 4 minutes, you're already having the full on conversation. Right. And that happens because we've started with micro truth as a way to slowly ease myself into being a little bit more open, a little bit more vulnerable, and having that conflict that almost all of us have feared after coming out of abusive relationships. Right. So the small truths essentially are rebuilding integrity with yourself. They're rebuilding trust in yourself. Instead of abandoning yourself and betraying yourself by saying yes to things, these micro truths bring you back to who you are, where you're more authentic and you're going to gain confidence out of it. A lot of us don't have confidence because we say yes when we mean no. We do this, I'm fine, when we're not. That's actually destroying your own confidence. Instead, use these phrases and it's going to rebuild that integrity with yourself over time. Okay. The next one, tracking your drains, tracking what it is that is draining you. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools that we have as human beings because we all think we know what's going on inside of our brain. But in all honesty, I mean, it's like a super highway of words and thoughts and phrases going every different direction and trying to make sense of what thought and what phrase and what thing is going past the movie projector to see what's going. It's so hard. It is so hard. So what we do is we take those words out of our head and we start writing it out, right? If you were to watch a baseball game, right? Using sports, you could use any sports you want, but let's talk about baseball, right? And you watch the entire game and you know everything that happened in that game, but then someone asked you how many hits there have been, and you don't have the little box score at the end of the bottom screen. You would be like, well, I don't know. Well, weren't you watching the whole game? Well, yes, but I wasn't writing it down because I wasn't writing it down. It's in my head and I could probably count back through them, but it's much, much harder to recount what's happened if I don't write it down. So journaling is an extremely powerful tool at taking the thoughts out of our head, putting it on paper where I can see it and I can start analyzing what's going on. It's too hard to both write it down in my head and analyze it in my head at the same time because there's too many gaps, too many places where I can't see because all of those words are jumbled up inside my head. So we start journaling things, right? It's not because this is not just going to happen, right? This is an accumulation of things that create this exhaustion. So we keep a journal. And I typically tell people before you even do anything as far as analyzing, go at least 7 to 14 days. So a week to 2 weeks, you need to do this journal. Typically, the longer you go, the easier it's going to be to see. So doing a 2 week journal, right? After every social interaction or major task. So anything that happens at work, you have a work meeting, you have a work function, you have a social function, you have a party to go to, somebody's birthday, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter if it was positive or negative. I want you to rate your energy from a 1 to 10, right? Like when coming out of it, rate it going in and rate it going out. So say I went to a function today with friends. I'm going to rate it going in, I was a 9. Coming out, I was a 6. Okay, it was draining on me, right? And then I'm going to ask myself a question. Did I feel like myself? Did I speak honestly? Did I hold a boundary, right? We're looking for patterns here, right? So if I rank every single time I'm in a social interaction or a work function, right? And I say, okay, I went in at a 9, I came out at a 7, and then I look at those questions. Did I feel like myself? And I say no. Okay, well then I was probably acting funky. Did I speak honestly? Sometimes. Did I hold a boundary? No. Now I see why I went down. But then in another situation, right? Let's say I have a family function and I go in at an 8 and I come out at an 8 and I say, okay, did I feel like myself? Yes, absolutely. I was 100% myself. Right? Did I speak honestly? Yeah, I wasn't afraid of anybody, my family abandoning me for my opinions on political stuff. So yeah, I'm doing good. Did I hold a boundary? Yes, I told my mom I wouldn't be able to be there for, that next weekend party or whatever she's doing. So I held a boundary too. So then we can start to see in what situations that we have that are good for us and what are bad. And what we can also analyze is, are there certain people that I'm around that I suddenly change my behavior? Are there certain places that I'm around that I suddenly change behavior? Right? Are there certain dynamics as far as their work relationships where whenever the boss is there, I act differently. Whenever this boss versus this boss is there, I act differently. If I start tracking this stuff, I can start to see patterns of what it is about that person that's causing me to do that. And do I feel like I need their approval? Do I feel like I need them to like me? Whatever the case may be, I can start seeing why I'm doing this, right? And we can then reframe those thoughts, right? Those self-betrayal patterns that we're in, we can reframe them and not say like, okay, I'm weak around this person. Like if you notice that it's the same person that you have to suddenly change your behavior around every single time they're around, right? We can say, I'm not weak around this person. I abandon myself to keep the peace. Why do I do that with this person? What is it am I searching for this from this person? And we realize that we're just searching for something that we were looking for, let's say they look like they look, act, walk, and talk like a father, right? And we're trying to gain their approval because what we're trying to do is gain our father's approval through this person. Once I realize that projection is there, it makes it easier for me to not do it with that person. Well, I'm not going to get my father to like me just because this person is. So we need to stop doing that people pleasing behavior, if that makes sense, right? Now, the next one after tracking your drains is aligning your words with your nervous system, right? The most exhausting thing you can do is say words that contradict your body's truth. Your body always knows, okay? When we have that intuition that something's not right, it's not intuition talking, that's your vagus nerve putting a signal to your stomach that, hey, something's wrong. Because your vagus nerve comes from here all the way down through your gut. It touches every major organ inside of your body here, okay? The vagus nerve is responsible for the sympathetic nervous system response. Okay, so when we start to feel like butterflies in our stomach, that's your vagus nerve saying, I have anxiety over what I'm seeing. The patterns and behaviors of the people in front of me look similar to something in my past, and it's stimulating your stomach to make you feel sick because I'm shutting off digestion because the fight or flight response has started. Okay, so what that's telling me is this person has now triggered me. And if I say yes to them, to people please them, I am not in alignment with what my body is now telling me not to do. Right? So before you speak in any situation, always notice your body. Where's the tightness? Or do you have shallow breath? Do you have a clenched jaw? Does your stomach start turning and twisting? What is going on? Because if we notice any of those things, tightness, shallow breath, clenching of jaws, the stomach turning upside down, anything of that manner, that's telling us our nervous system is activated. We have to do a little bit more research before we actually respond. That's where I typically tell people, hey, can you give me 5 minutes to make a decision on this, right? Or I'm not really sure what I think on that is a good way, because that's the God's honest truth at that point. You can't decide whether or not you want to people please and tell them you like their opinion or you disagree with their opinion. So just tell them, hey, can you give me 5 minutes? I'm not really sure how I feel about that. But before we speak, noticing what our body's doing. Do we get sweaty? Do our palms get sweaty? Right? Is it very hard for us to focus on something with our eyes? Those things all are telling me that I'm not in alignment with my body right now, and I need to make sure that my words align with what makes me feel peaceful. Right? So if your words feel forced, pause, take 2 deep breaths, and then rephrase it. Right? So if you start talking and it's like, I feel like I feel like I can't say anything right. Take 2 deep breaths, rephrase it, and start over, right? We need to also think about things like replacing certain phrases. Again, replacing the I'm fine phrase with I'm still sorting through how I feel. Just like I just gave you there, we can say like, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, right? We can say, I'm still sorting through how I feel, right? We replace that I'm fine with a phrase that tells you some ambiguity, but is not really saying yes or no because you're not even sure. So you shouldn't say anything unless you're sure. And a lot of people say, well, if I'm not sure of myself, I don't look confident. There's confidence in knowing that you're not sure. There's more confidence in you knowing you're not sure than there is in you saying the wrong answer. You'll be more confident in that, and you'll be more aligned with your authenticity at that point. Okay. So the next one is replacing I'm sorry with thank you for your patience, right? Sounds really weird, right? But like, when you ask like, hey man, I just need some space for a little bit, right? When you come back, don't be like, I'm sorry, for ghosting you for a day. Say, thank you for your patience while I sorted through this, right? That's taking a stand for myself. That's saying I am right for taking that time. It's okay that I took that time. But at the same time, we want to respect them and say thank you for that patience that you just displayed by not going crazy when I gave you that I need space wine. Okay, so I'm sorry gets replaced with thank you for, and then whatever it is, patience. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for your time. Whatever it is, say thank you instead of saying I'm sorry. It's a huge shift that's going to happen inside your mind when you do that, right? Now, the in a real life scenario, that'd be like you've asked somebody, "Are you mad?" And instead of defaulting, or you're asked by somebody, "Are you mad?" And your default would be to be saying no or I'm fine. You can say, "I'm not ready to talk yet. I just need a few minutes." That's a real world way of making sure your words align with how your body feels. Like they ask, "Are you mad?" And you're like you're triggered, right? You feel your jaw clench because you are actually mad. Instead of letting out that anger, because this is where we can react wrong and not respond when we want to respond, right? We take that deep breath, we notice our jaws clenched, and we know that that's not the time to say anything because we're going to say something that we don't mean because we're saying it from our nervous system's activation. We're not saying it from a place of logic or the parasympathetic side of our nervous system. So we take that deep breath. We just calmly say, hey, give me a few minutes, right? I need some time to sort through my thoughts. There's nothing wrong with that because you're not agreeing or disagreeing. You're not telling them you're mad or you're not mad. You're trying to figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with taking a few minutes to figure out how you feel before you speak on something, okay? So the next part of this is to repair instead of repress. Mistakes in communication or authenticity are going to happen. That doesn't mean you fail. It means you're human. What matters is how you clean it up. Think about like saying like man, I totally shouldn't have agreed to that thing. Okay, well, instead of sitting there stewing on how you shouldn't have done that, take a step back. Okay, take a step back and say, okay, I need to tell this person that I can't do it. How do I say that? Well, you can name what you did. So I look at it and I say, I agreed to something that I didn't mean to. And that's exactly how we can word it to them, right? We can tell them like, look, I'm really sorry, but I agreed to something that I didn't mean to. Okay. And I need to back out of it, right? Then we can actually validate the impact of that. So when we're looking at these as steps, so to speak, we're naming what we did. I agreed to something that I didn't mean. We can validate what impact that has. I realize that may have left you confused or it may have hurt you. It may put you in a tight spot. I get that by me backing out right now, right? Then we can take ownership. That's on me. I'm learning to speak a little more honesty, and I should have done that prior to. Share your new boundary or your new truth as the fourth step. In the future, I'll check in with myself before answering. So this whole paragraph that I'm about to state the whole thing right off the page. There's four steps. Name what you did, validate the impact, take ownership, and share your new boundary or truth. So in a phrase to this person that has asked you to do something, you agreed to it, now you want to back out. You're going to want to say it like this. And I agreed to something that I didn't mean to. I realize that may have confused you. It may have hurt you. That's on me. I'm learning to speak a little bit more honestly, right? And in the future, I'm going to check in with myself before I answer you or before I agree to something that I'm not sure if I can be there for. So we need to repair. We're not just going to tell a person, well, now I just need to tell them no, we need to ghost them. Because what will happen is these people that are people pleasers or peacekeepers, right? We end up ghosting people because we're just like, oh, I just don't want to deal with it. I'm going to not say anything. And then when they ask me later, like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot what day it was. We're going to give an excuse. We're going to lie to them, right? Instead of that, before we end up in that position, let's take the time to have the hard conversation right now. And I guarantee if you do this and you do this in this respectful manner, if they do respect you, they do value they're going to be like, I'm so sorry. I felt maybe I was giving you a little bit too much pressure. They're typically going to own up to their side if I've now owned up to my side. That typically is what happens. If they don't, and they're like, yeah, you're so stupid for doing that. That just shows us we don't need to be with that person anyways. That just shows me that that person should not be in my life and I can walk away from it cleanly and a little bit more highly, like with my head held high, if that makes sense, okay? This rebuilds that trust, not just with others, but within yourself too. Because as you state these kinds of repair type phrases, you're building trust in yourself and confidence that you can stand up for yourself. Again, confidence is it's very overarching. There's lots of things that play into it, But in this case, when we know to stand up for ourselves, we start to feel way more confident in who we are because I'm standing up for what is my actual truth, regardless if somebody else believes in it. Just like confidence is doing something, even if I don't have the ability or I don't think I know what I'm doing, if I continue to do it, I'm going to continue to gain, I'm going to grow, and that growth is what causes confidence. Same thing here. By speaking up in my mind and standing up for myself, the first time it may feel awkward, but the more I do it, the more confidence I gain in myself to stand up for myself. And I start regaining that authentic voice. And eventually, over time, you're going to get to a point where, like, you don't care what's going to happen from the conflict. You get to the point where you're like, I'm going to speak my mind, and if they don't like it, they can go away. They can exit my life. That's where we set a boundary. You do this, and I'm going to exit, right? If you do this, like, it makes it very easy to spot people that do not respect us because we're talking in this way that is very articulate, is expressing our side, it's expressing the remorse and the ownership, and allowing them to show us who they are. Instead of trying to, overextend ourselves and they can show who they are based on what I'm giving them, we get to see who they actually are and whether or not they respect us. But that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully this class gives you guys some insight into why you may feel emotionally exhausted at times from doing these behaviors. It may shed light on these behaviors in general, knowing what perfectionism looks like or feels like, what peacekeepers look like, and what people-pleasing looks like. They're typically the three biggest behaviors that I run into as a coach. And I saw some questions. Somebody was asking about my book. What's the name of the book? The name of the book is called Trigger Control. I know for you, those of you on the Instagram side, you can't really see it very well because it is backwards, but you can see it right there. It's on Amazon. I think Books A Million has it. There's a couple other obscure places. You can either buy it on Amazon or you can go onto my website, which there's links at the top and top of both my Facebook and Instagram pages. You guys can go there. You can go ahead and send me, or you can go ahead and buy the book there. I'm seeing some other comments here. I'm trying to read. Wow, there's people on here asking for phone numbers and stuff. That's not, you guys should not be putting your phone number on here like that. That is not good. Do not, please, I may end up having to delete that comment, but please do not put your phone number out here for everybody to see in the world. That is not a good idea. And most people that are asking you to connect are fake people. And I try to block as many of them as I possibly can, but watch out for that stuff on here, guys. Do not, if somebody's saying, oh, it's so nice to see you, I love everything that you say, would you please kindly send me a friend request? Don't do it. That is not a good thing. Okay. But other than that, that's all I got for you guys today. We will not be having a live next Sunday. I'm traveling. I'm going to be with a client for her 5K race that she has set for herself. I'll be up in the Philadelphia area. I'm going to a Cubs game on Monday, Cubs and Phillies on Monday. So there will not be a live at 5 next week. Take the week off. I will be posting. I forgot to post the last week's on YouTube channel because I had some issues with my editing software. That's all been fixed now, so I should have last week's and this week's posted to the YouTube channel so you can have rewatches if you need to. But other than that, hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. As always, stay safe, keep the faith, and never let them grind you down. Thanks, guys.